Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. And a couple months back, Xbox's Phil Spencer appeared on stage with Square Enix to announce Final Fantasy XIV and an improved relationship going forward. Now, there's been a lot of speculation as to what this could possibly produce, and, well, according to at least one insider, we may have gotten our answer, which might even be a little bit surprising. It is good news, and I'll explain why here in just a little bit. Then also, the Activision Blizzard acquisition is almost finally over, unless something unexpected happens. We'll kind of see about all of that soon enough, but there's already another report floating around claiming that another big game publisher could come off the board as another company is considering jumping in to the gaming space. Before we get started though, do make sure to hit that subscribe and ring that bell. About 50% of you currently aren't subscribed, and if you want your daily gaming news dose, I am here every week, Monday through Friday, so do make sure to hit those buttons. That way, every time I drop a new video, it'll be delivered directly to your device. As always, I truly do appreciate you all. With that said though, let's just go and jump right into things, starting off with Sony's recent decision-making once again. Yesterday, we talked about the new PS5 revision and how they're quietly increasing the price, but there's actually something I did miss, because apparently they're not just raising the price of the PS5 itself, but over in Japan, they're also increasing the price of their accessories starting October 18th. This was announced over in their Japanese PlayStation blog post, and you can see here, they're raising the price for their controllers, the Pulse 3D wireless headset, the HD camera, the media remote control, and even the controller charging stand itself. Each price increase varies, but it's about the equivalent to $10 to $15 for most of these accessories. One is about $5. I believe that is the media remote control. Now, as of this moment, though, this hasn't impacted any other region. This appears to be only for Japan for the moment, and that has some people thinking maybe it's because yen has become a lot weaker versus other currencies. So maybe that's why they're doing it in Japan and nowhere else. But, you know, that's the thing, because this is something Sony has been doing pretty much all generation long. They've increased the price of their games to $70. They've increased the price of their consoles. They increased the price of their subscriptions, and they also charge for game upgrades. So why not accessories next? As we're seeing here, those aren't safe either, and based on what we've seen so far this generation, you do have to kind of wonder if Sony is maybe considering changing the price of their accessories worldwide. For the time being, though, this is only in Japan, but if you are located in Japan, if you're watching this video, you might want to go ahead and buy those accessories before October 18th if you have any interest in them at all, and if you want to save a little bit of money. Moving on, though, Activision Blizzard reportedly had a big meeting yesterday that caused a lot of buzz both internally and also online as the details leaked out thanks to Windows Central. It's hard to keep things like this a secret, but reportedly they talked about various things, including the Microsoft acquisition, and this is what everybody's just so excited about right now. They talked about the revival of Guitar Hero. Now, if you played these games back during the mid-2000s when they first released, you know, this series was a true phenomenon in gaming. Everybody was getting Guitar Hero, and they were just a blast to play. People were trying to break records, competing on the most difficult songs. They were fun party games, especially, and they, of course, spawned multiple sequels until eventually fans became burned out. Now, Activision did try to reboot the series. I believe it was back in 2015, though they didn't really have much success, but sounds like they want to try one more time. Now, that's really kind of the question here, though. Can they bring this series back and ultimately have success like they used to? And that's definitely up for debate. We saw this series flame out once, and recapturing a phenomenon like that, it can be difficult. But I think when you kind of look at the situation, I think that there are certain things that gives this series a good shot at making a successful comeback. One, I'd say, is nostalgia. It's been a long time since we've seen a Guitar Hero game, so there's been enough time for people to actually miss it. And I mean, a lot of people who played the original, they've grown up and they have their own kids now. So I think not only would a lot of people like to revisit this series, but they'd also like to share it with their families now that they've grown up. If anything else, I mean, I think the fact that this story is just so talked about right now, that goes to show you that there's a real, genuine interest in bringing Guitar Hero back. The number 2 reason, though, is that the gaming landscape has changed drastically since this series was first born. Live service games, that's a thing now, and Guitar Hero could easily fit into that formula. They don't have to release a new game every other year like they used to. They can just release one game and have new songs come to it over time as long as they have a dedicated audience. And that brings us to the last reason on why a Guitar Hero revival makes sense. The inclusion of Xbox and Xbox Game Pass. The inclusion of Xbox Game Pass, unless it's a free-to-play game, and then, well, this reason would be moot in that case, but when you combine a live service game with 25+ million subscribers, that's an immediate large audience that could potentially play their game. Now, subscribers will still have to buy the peripherals, but Game Pass subscribers could still get other benefits to make it worthwhile. Let me know what you all think about this, though. Would you like to see a Guitar Hero revival, and do you think that it has a chance at success in modern day times? Speaking of Xbox a moment ago, though, there's been a lot of questions regarding their relationship with Square Enix. Just a few months back, Phil Spencer came on stage with Square Enix, and not only did they announce Final Fantasy XIV, but Square Enix also pledged to release more games on Xbox going forward when possible. What does that really mean, though? Are we just talking about some of their smaller budget games, or is there actually a chance that this involves bigger games? Well, my take on this has always been future small and AAA games have a much increased chance of appearing on Xbox day and date alongside the PlayStation and Nintendo versions from this point forward. I think that Square Enix under its new leadership will be a more multi-platform company now, rather than just being this almost company for hire where they sign exclusive contracts left and right. So that's the way that I kind of look at this announcement. Now, for big games that's already released like Final Fantasy XVI and 7 Remake, though, you do have to kind of think that a lot of that depends on what kind of contract Square Enix signed with Sony. How long does Sony have those games locked down? Is Final Fantasy VII Remake still under contract, or has that expired? We know that the box art claimed that it would be exclusive for just 1 year, but it still to this day has not appeared on Xbox. So was that expiration date only referring to a PC version? And I mean, there's also similar questions for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and 16. Well, according to Jez Corden on the Xbox 2 podcast, he had something very interesting to say about this topic. Check this out. He said, and I quote, "I've been hearing the Square Enix partnership because I was a bit pessimistic when they announced the partnership, and I was thinking like it's just going to be games like Octopath. It's going to be Pixel Remasters maybe, and Final Fantasy XIV. I don't think it's going to be any of the heavy hitters and anything like that. Your Final Fantasy VII Remake, Rebirth, Final Fantasy XVI. But I've heard it could actually be just full-blown everything. So, I'm hearing positive things about it. So stay tuned. It's just going to take some time because those games haven't been in development, but now maybe they will." Now, Jez Corden has been a reliable insider in the past. He writes all kinds of stuff for Windows Central, and you can trace a lot of leaks back to him specifically that turned out to be correct. So he obviously has good sources, but still, with any rumor, it's always good to take things with a grain of salt. I always recommend that, and just because he has been correct in the past, that doesn't change anything. I'm still going to recommend taking this with a grain of salt. It, however, though, does give Xbox fans newfound hope that these games will eventually be ported over. As he said, though, don't expect it to happen immediately, but it is very possible based on what he's hearing. That does kind of beg the question, though. If this is indeed possible, does Sony not have an extended multi-year contract to keep them off of Xbox? Has it been Square Enix's decision all along not to port them over to Xbox? And I'm specifically talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake here, because that's the game that we specifically know about. It was very well known that 7 Remake was a 1-year timed exclusive. They posted it right on the box art and everything. But after that expired, just nothing happened. Now, my original take on this was that maybe Sony extended it with the Intergrade edition. So maybe they locked it down for an extra year or something like that. But then a little later on, they ported it over to PC, and there was still no Xbox version to be found. So the question is that now a Square Enix decision, or does Sony still have it under wraps? So I still think that this entire topic relies on that information, but At the same time, we're also hearing that it's a possibility that Final Fantasy VII Remake could be ported over to the Nintendo Switch successor. They've already experimented and got it running on the Switch successor according to a recent leak. Now, that's not a guarantee that it will release on the Switch successor, but maybe, just maybe, Square Enix does hold the destiny for this game now, and with their new leadership, maybe they're looking to port it to more platforms. We also know that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has a 3-month timed exclusive deal as well for PlayStation, so after that, could it also be ported to Nintendo and Xbox alongside PC? I mean, there's still some big questions here, but if anything, I guess we'll see. It's sounding like it could actually be a real possibility depending on if you believe what Jez Corden said. Moving on, though, the Activision Blizzard acquisition is not the only big buyout news that we've heard about this week, because apparently EA could be the next major publisher to be targeted, or at the very least, there are discussions to make it happen. And check this out. By reportedly Disney, out of all companies, Bloomberg reported that Disney CEO deputies are pushing to quote-unquote transform Disney into a gaming giant, and an EA acquisition has been floated around. However, the CEO has so far been non-committal. Now, this actually does make a lot of sense when you start to think about it. They've already got a taste of what success feels like in gaming, a lot of success for that matter. Spider-Man was ultra successful, and pretty much since then, they've doubled down on gaming. They've licensed out a ton of games, whether that be Spider-Man 2, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Wolverine, Midnight Suns, and even Avatar. So, I mean, with them already licensing out all of these different games, why not be a little bit more hands-on and really get the ball rolling? I think that that's kind of their mindset right now. Disney has a lot of IP, and if they had a lot of studios, well, then they could just kind of churn out game after game and then keep all the money for themselves rather than paying a third party. There are certain benefits of doing things internally, and that's where a publisher acquisition like this would make sense for them. It would be an immediate entry to gaming with a lot of studios under their belt. But as for the EA acquisition specifically, I want to talk about that for a moment, because I would not look into that too much. To me, it sounds like this is really just an idea being floated around, and somebody probably mentioned EA because they already have a close relationship with the Star Wars franchise. So I think it's just one possibility here. And it's also important to keep in mind, just because somebody might want to acquire EA, that doesn't mean that EA wants to be acquired. So you have to kind of keep that in mind. The more important part of the story is not necessarily the who they want to acquire, but rather that they're considering a publisher acquisition at all. So Ubisoft, as an example, could be another target technically. I'll say this right now, though. I absolutely do not want this to happen. Hypothetically, if Disney were to acquire somebody like EA, well, then they could potentially become a Disney IP factory. In other words, franchises that originated from gaming might be put on the back burner. Games like Battlefield, Dead Space, Need for Speed, and all these other games. Disney might go in thinking to themselves, well, we would rather have these studios work on our IP specifically than those franchises, because that's why we're purchasing a publisher. We need a large amount of studios. Now, if you're a fan of Disney and you like their franchises a lot, you might feel different about this, but for me, I prefer them to just kind of do what they're doing right now. License out IP when it makes sense and just kind of stay out of the way. Let these game companies do what they do best, and that's by making great games. I don't know, though. I know there's probably going to be some differing opinions on this, so just kind of let me know what you all think about this. Do you like this idea or not? Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though. We're asked you all, should Xbox make the Fallout 3 and Oblivion remasters console exclusives? And this was a resounding yes, with 70% voting for that. And I do completely agree with you all here. I think making these games exclusives makes a lot of sense. These are big flagship franchises, and especially if they put a lot of work into these remasters, remakes, or whatever they are, if they put a lot of work into them, it makes a lot of sense for Microsoft to kind of cement Xbox as the home for the Elder Scrolls and Fallout. I mean, it might be a while before we get the Elder Scrolls 6 and Fallout 5, but these remasters, they'd be a great way to kickstart these IP as Xbox-branded games. Again, if these are big upgrades, they could be real subscription and system sellers. These aren't Quake 1 and 2. I mean, those are great games and everything, don't get me wrong, but the scope is just entirely different. So I think that it makes perfect sense to make these games exclusive. Xbox went out and acquired Bethesda for a lot of money with exclusives in mind. They've been very clear about that, and I can guarantee you that The Elder Scrolls 6 and Fallout is among the top reasons why they wanted Bethesda. These are flagship, brand-changing games, so yeah, I'm going to vote for yes here. Now, will Xbox actually do it? I mean, that's not necessarily a guarantee, but the way that I look at it personally, I think that there's a very good chance that, yes, they will be exclusive. But I will say this much, I do think that some of that depends on how much effort they're putting into these games. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you like the video, don't forget about the notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.